We all want to spend our money wisely, so here's 4 whiskeys I think just aren't really worth the money. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch, and thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So, recently I released a video called 7 Whiskeys That Are Absolutely Worth Your Money. Wanted to highlight for you guys some bottles I think are always worth the buy. Had to kind of address the flip side of that equation, which is bottles that I don't really consider worth the buy, bottles that I have gone out and gotten and sort of regretted or not thought lived up to the price point, especially some of the hyped up price points. So I wanted to make a video highlighting 4 of those bottles for you so that maybe you can know what to avoid or what to consider when you're buying as well. So without further ado, let's dive into the list. We're going to start with the lowest priced bottle on this list, and we'll work our way up to the highest priced bottle. So to start with, we've got a bottle of whiskey that has a classic problem, and that is a little bit of youth in today's market, and that is Restoration Rye whiskey from Castle and Key. For me, this is a 104 proof rye whiskey that I believe age statement on here, 3.5 years minimum. It just tastes youthful to me for rye. I think the sweet spot can be a little bit younger than bourbon. So you get to a 5-year rye, you get to especially like a 7-year rye, you're looking at something that could be really, really powerfully, wonderfully flavored. This to me just has those more grainy ethanol notes, kind of an astringency that goes along with it. I can see some of the floral nature, some of the herbal qualities coming through. It's by no means like repugnant. You can sip on it and it's okay, but I've shared this with others and they thought too it was kind of lackluster. And you know, the big problem here is you're spending 40 to 45 bucks, sometimes a little bit more than that on this bottle. Now they have great presentation, wonderful bottles. Castle and Key has a kind of a great future, I think, ahead of them with lots of potential, but right now their stuff is kind of young and I struggle with it because it's starting out at a pretty high price point for stuff that I think should better be, introduced to us at like a $30 price point. Of course, when you're starting more of a craft project, reviving a distillery as they are at Castle and Key, you gotta have a higher price point to get more return, but still, I just don't think this one quite lives up to the price point. Next on the list is a bottle from a distillery that has many products and a well-regarded distillery overall. This product from their core lineup just sits the lowest on the totem pole for me, and that is Michter's Bourbon. So just their regular old US 1 small batch bourbon. For me, out of the rye in their lineup and the sour mash and maybe even the American US 1 whiskey, like the bourbon for $40 to $45 is okay, it's just okay. The proof point here is 91.4 proof, so a lower proof bourbon overall. I'm not opposed to lower proof stuff, but when you got a lower proof option, it's got to be really spectacularly well balanced for me to think it's worth more, because I'm getting less proof, less flavor overall sometimes. And for me, the real problem with this one is not that this whiskey is bad in any way, it's just the sheer volume of other options that I can get for $45 or less that I think are better than this. So that just puts it in this category of, is it really worth my money? And I think my answer ultimately for this bottle most of the time is not really. All right, so the remaining 2 bottles on our list have a similar problem, which is at MSRP, I think they're decent values, but they get hyped up so much that beyond that point, it's a little bit sad that we have to consider even spending that amount of money on these bottles. So the first in that category is Henry McKenna Tenure. So we've got a 10-year-old single barrel product here. I know that that's going to come with some relative amount of price point. MSRP on this is $50, which I think is totally fair, again, for that amount of age. It's 100 proof, bottled in bond. A lot of good stats here. In terms of what you actually get or what I get on this particular single barrel, now that may vary a little bit. There might be some that are phenomenal. My single barrel just falls a little bit flat. It just doesn't have as much flavor as I want on a, more hyped up limited whiskey. It's a little bit too tannic and oaky for me. It's just not quite balanced right. And the real problem here is that $50 is probably not what you're going to spend or what you're going to see this priced at. If you see this in stores, it might be going for $70, $75, sometimes even $100. And for me, because it's got that limited allocated hype, even at $50, it's MSRP, I question it. But anytime you go past that, I start to go, really, probably not worth it. Especially because the single barrels, apparently with Henry McKenna, vary so much that you really don't have quite an idea of whether or not you're getting a good one or one that's going to be kind of lackluster. All right, so speaking of single barrels and lots of hype, the next one is not going to surprise anybody, and that is Blanton's. Regular old Blanton single barrel, which is a $65 MSRP. It's a 93 proof whiskey at $65 for a great presentation and a pretty decent whiskey. I'm okay paying that. But honestly, that's kind of where I put the max on this in terms of the quality of the whiskey. The one caveat I will make for that, and even a little bit for Henry McKenna, is if it's your first bottle, you've never had it before, you've never seen it before, and you're sitting there looking at Blanton's for $80, it might be worth it to grab it and at least have it as part of your collection. Beyond that point, spending more than $65 for me at this point with Blanton's, I just can't really see it happening. It's just not good enough whiskey to justify more than that. Again, it's that same problem that we ran into with the US 1 bourbon from Michter's. It's like, there's so much good stuff out there that I can get for $65 or less that Blanton sometimes pales in comparison, which is sad to say. And then you think about the fact that sometimes this goes for $100, $125, and you're like, wow, we've really hyped this up beyond the point of recognition, where the value of what you're getting out of the bottle just does not match the hype, in my opinion. You know, it's kind of easy to crap on Blanton's and turn your nose up at it. I'm not trying to do that. Again, I enjoy Blanton's. I think for $65, single barrel, great presentation, it's solid. It's a solid whiskey, but the way we treat it and the price point you might have to pay for it is just sometimes absurd. So I want you guys to be aware that for me, this one sits right in the middle of the pack in terms of whiskeys, and there's so much else out there at $65 that you might be able to get that's going to be even better. All right, everybody, so that's my list. That's my 4 whiskeys that, from my own personal experience, have just not lived up to the price point that you have to pay to get them, especially if they're hyped up like Henry McKenna and Blanton's. Again, I think one of the big things to reflect on here is just that at each of these price points, how much other great whiskey is out there that you could get, and ultimately whiskey that's probably better than these products that are sitting on the table. Just food for thought. Hopefully this has been helpful to you guys. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the list. Do you think any of these are wrong? Do you have any other bottles that you have bought before that you maybe regret a little bit or think are just not worth the price? Would love to hear and start a conversation in the comments below. Until I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey, be careful where you spend your money, and cheers.